Hey Kim, Ellen here. Thanks so much for making time to visit with our Osher Lifelong Learning Institute class today. Cannot tell you how excited I am to see you again. It's been 2 years. I just want to show you that the Only Kayak is still active on my bookcase, and I've added a few flags since I was able to visit with you in person a couple of years ago. So again, thank you very much for coming to visit with us today. And I'm going to ask you to spend a few minutes kind of catch us up on what you're doing in Alaska and what was the pull. And then I'd love it. I know you've got a brand new edition of the Only Kayak, so I'd love for you to tell us what's that about and to read us some things. And then I'd love it very much. This is personal to me. If you would close out with my most favorite of your stories about Sticky and John Muir's little dog. So if that's okay with you, would you care to take it away?
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, and welcome everybody. Nice to meet you at a distance. My name is Kim Heacox. I'm a writer, a photographer, a musician, and a climate change activist. I live in a little town of Gustavus, Alaska, of about 400 people and 400 ravens and 500 moose, next to Glacier Bay National Park in Southeast Alaska, not far from Juneau. I was raised in Spokane, Washington, Eastern Washington State near Idaho. I had a college professor who changed my life, talked one time about the dynamic glaciated landscapes of the American West. And one of the students on a field trip lamented, why isn't there a landscape today just as dynamic as Montana was 20,000 years ago with glaciers everywhere? And my professor said, there is such a place. It's a bay in Alaska near Juneau called Glacier Bay, that was once all glacier and no bay. And since then, the ice has retreated 70 miles to create an entirely new landscape. And I said at the time, I'm going there. I was only 20. I had to get work with the National Park Service in Washington State and then California, and finally got hired in Alaska. And I came up here. People like to say that you come to Alaska for one summer and you forget to leave. It's so life-changing. I stayed, and that was 1979. So here I am with my wife, Melanie. We have no children. We have many wonderful friends and family members. We live on 18 acres in a small town next to a national park that we're going to develop into an environmental leadership school. Together with the Indian Islands Institute and the Arate Project, it'll be a 40-acre campus in Gustavus one day. We want to create new Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's and new Jay Inslee's, like he's the governor of Washington State, new environmental leaders. Because really, among all the serious problems we're facing in the world and in America today, one of them is a keystone problem. It's like when you build a stone bridge over a river and you put in that capstone in the middle. And if you remove that capstone, the whole rest of the bridge would collapse. And that capstone issue is climate change, which basically means maintaining a livable planet. And it's the one issue that as it gets worse, everything else will worsen. So we're devoted to hanging on to a livable planet. And yes, Ellen, my book that you love so much, thank you for all your support over the years. The Only Kayak was published 15 years ago, and the publisher just released a new commemorative 15th anniversary edition. And I wrote a new afterword in this book. But I write in the prologue that talking about coming to a reborn landscape out from under the ice, I write that people are reborn here too. This place is that powerful. In Glacier Bay, you don't inherit, you create. You practice resurrection because the land and the sea, they show you that anything is possible. Moose swim across fjords. Bears traverse glaciers. Flowers emerge from granite boulders. Inlets fill with glacial silt. Shorelines shift and nautical charts become obsolete as the land, the actual crust of the earth, rebounds after the immense weight of glacial ice has been lifted. As the land rises, islands merge with the mainland to become peninsulas. Tide flats become meadows. meadows become forests. Travel this country and you move through more than geography, you move through time. Trace your finger over glacial striations and metamorphic rock, stare into the fractured blue walls of the Ice Age, and you'll find they're not walls at all, they're windows. So I begin the book with a kayak adventure with my friend Richard Steele. He asked me to go kayaking with him, and I hesitated because he had kind of a crazy gleam in his eye, but he's a dear friend to this day. We were brand new rangers in Alaska, and he said that he likes it out here because in the wilderness you learn what's authentic and what's not. To boot up means to put on your boots, not turn on your computer. A mouse is still a mouse. Software is warm socks, and the hard drive is your kayak. You sleep on the ground until you're uncomfortable in a bed. You breathe fresh air until you suffocate indoors. You laugh from your toes and you fly in your dreams. You find that you can sing the high notes, that true wealth is not a matter of adding to your possessions, but of subtracting from the sum of your desires. You understand what is enough and what is too much and why the prophets went into the desert alone. You accept impermanence, or at least you think about it. You navigate without numbers. You regard the powerful and the large, but also the small and the unheralded. You think about relationships more than names and stories more than statistics. You remember that gifts are not taken, they are received, and best of all, given. You make a new friend. You learn an economy of motion in each synchronous stroke, watching the paddles rise and fall, the blades up and down, the droplets dripping away with unspeakable grace. So the book did quite well over the years, and I'm honored to have it re-released. And the new afterword that I write in the book, I wrote last summer, and I wrote, Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old Swedish climate change activist and nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize, again, as I write this, is sailing to America on a sail and solar-powered boat to address the United Nations. This will be the first time, her first time, among frisky people whose federal government spends 10 times more money on fossil fuel subsidies than it does on education. In a land that calls itself a democracy, but in sad truth is an oligarchy rife with political bribery. As such, she will have her critics, as will I, for writing the sentence above. The best way, I believe, to talk about these kinds of issues is through story. Everybody likes a story. If you say, can I tell you a story? Who's going to say, no, I don't like stories? Who says to their granddaughter, come over here, sweetie, so I can read you some bedtime statistics? That's not who we are. Statistics are a great tool, but they're not who we are. I recommend to use story as often as you can. We are made of stories, stardust and stories, and some remarkable spiritual element I'm still wrapping my head around. One of the stories I talk about in this book that I know you love, Ellen, is John Muir's story with his little dog Stikine that went with him out on a glacier for the whole day, exploring the glacier, and they had to get their way back across the glacier, and they got lost. But they knew they had to cross this long crevasse because the camp was in a certain direction, and there was only a sliver bridge of ice to cross to get over the crevasse. And Muir cut notches with an ice axe and made it, turned back and beckoned the little dog to come in his path and use the notches that Muir had crossed. And Muir exhorted the dog, come on, little fellow. No right way is easy in this world. We must risk our lives in order to save them. And eventually the dog did make it across. And I feel that by coming to Alaska and stepping into that unknown world out of my comfort zone, I risked my life and I saved myself. And I tell the story in the Only Kayak.
That was beautiful.
Go to the edge of your comfort zone and then go just a little bit beyond.
That's awesome. Kim, thank you. Thank you so much. I was crying in the front part, and you know what happens to me when I think of the Stikine story and that line, sometimes you have to risk your life in order to save it. Thank you so much for visiting with us today. I hope that I get a chance to come to Alaska again, and I'm sure you have inspired folks in this class when COVID has released its death grip on our throats to try and come up to Glacier Bay, and perhaps they'll be as fortunate as Karen and I were to have a cup of coffee with you on the lawn. Thank you, Kim. You